Will there be another mess to clean up? Only if we do it right. Black Bag was directed by Steven Soderbergh. This is his second film in 2025 after Presence. You should really watch Black Bag because Black Bag is a whole lot better than Presence. Presence had a neat little gimmick, but that's really all it had. Black Bag is a return to form, shall we say, for Mr. Soderbergh, because in the vein of Ocean's 11 through 13 and various other spy dramas, with double twisty-turny stuff going on, this is Soderbergh at the peak of his powers, along with writer David Coop, who also had something to do with Presence. He's done better movies. Presence I didn't really like, by the way, just in case you didn't know that. Check out my Letterboxd. Check out my review of Presence that I did just a couple months ago. My God, we're only in the middle of March, and I'm almost at 60 movies for the year. Good Lord. So anyway, he also did Jurassic Park, Mission Impossible, and by the way, Steven also, I think, really peaked early with Traffic before finding another peak later on in his career. Who doesn't love having multiple peaks? Speaking of peaks, this cast is pretty goddamn peak. I don't actually think that's going to become a thing. You have a couple, George and Catherine. They are two spies. George is played by Michael Fassbender. I absolutely have never taken the first letter of his last name off and made a dirty word. How dare you accuse me of such a thing? But that being said, Michael Fassbender, tremendous. Very low key, a very good actor. Some people almost accuse him of being robotic at times, but he's very somber. He's very just dialed in, shall we say. He's locked in, as the kids say. I actually don't think the kids have ever said that, but nevertheless, Michael Fassbender is George. He is very, very regimented. He's very calm. He's very dedicated to his job. He's also very dedicated to his wife, Catherine, who's played by Cate Blanchett. And let me tell you right now, if you ever get a chance to land a gorgeous goddess like Cate Blanchett, somebody that is so captivating and so alluring, you want to make sure that you treat her like the queen that she is. That being said, Cate Blanchett, she also is a spy. They work at, this agency, and then suddenly Catherine is accused of basically, international espionage, shall we say, before I dive into the minutia. That isn't really a lot of minutia about this whole thing. And George must decide, is his marriage more important or his loyalty to king and country more important? Because you see, they're in the UK. Is that still about king and country? Is it queen and country? Is it about Brexit? What is it about over there? Let me know, British people. So they can't do it alone, by the way, because while it would certainly be interesting to see these two just be, as great as they are at acting and spouting this, catchy dialogue, you need more people. So you have Gustav Skarsgård. He plays Philip, and then he's a neat little character. You have Tom Burke, not to be confused with the wrestling historian, by the way, for those who don't know. He plays Freddie Smalls. You're killing me, Freddie Smalls. And then you have Marissa Abella, who was in Back to Black. Yes, the ill-fated turn as Amy Winehouse, and it wasn't her fault. She did her best. That movie sucked. She plays Clarissa. I do have to say, it's nice to see her in a project where she can be respected and not hated upon. Her and Freddie are together, and then you have Colonel James Stokes, played by Regé Jean Page. I'm pretty certain I probably butchered that. The guy from Bridgerton, at least one of the guys from Bridgerton. You know which one I'm talking about if you look at the cast. I've seen like 3 or 4 episodes, and I don't remember his character's name. All I know is a lot of people were having the sex. A lot of sex going on in that show. There's implications of sex with this. And also, Naomi Harris plays Dr. Zoe Vaughn. So basically the idea is there is something that is sensitive material that Catherine is accused of taking, and George must decide what he shall do. Of course, this starts with a dinner where everybody's gathered, and there's this lying game because George is so good at detecting. He's basically a human lie detector test. He ends up basically playing a game like, I vow, or it's like I vow to do this, and I, resolve. I believe I resolve was it, but I resolve, I vow, whatever. And lies get exposed about these people. Also, cheating and sleeping around seems to be a prevalent theme with this movie. And from there, we carry on with a movie that's mostly familiar as far as the story, and it's actually pretty easy to fucking figure out who's involved in this and who actually is the person that was responsible for this. Also, Pierce Brosnan happens to have a brief cameo as the boss of this whole agency. And I really hope they put makeup on him because I did not know that he... I mean, we all age, but man, he got old fast. And we get these characters interacting with each other in such a smug and, quippy way. It's like, man, British dramas, Human Centipede together, like 7 or 8 of them, wouldn't be as smug as this. It's pretty smug, it's pretty slickly produced, and the typical Soderbergh camera shots, because he's done stuff like Kimmy, Unsane. None of this stuff is like Unsane, which I think was more gimmicky, I think was alright. But you have Contagion. You have examples looking at his filmography of how good Steven Soderbergh is. And it really doesn't take very long to figure out who's responsible for this. But the centerpiece is Michael Fassbender with an F, as well as Cate Blanchett. There are a few moments where I'm just like, man, Cate just... I mean, she looked even better in Nightmare Alley, but then again, I guess she was glammed up, as the kids used to say back before I was born. But there's some great dialogue, some great, some nice little bit of a setup. But really what this is, and I'm going to sum this up before I get into spoilers, AJ Moser on Letterboxd, that's AJMOSER, says, everyone's hot and no one is happy. And I think that is a perfect encapsulation of this whole thing. They didn't ask me to do this, I just looked at that and wanted to credit them. That's AJ Moser on Letterboxd. That's just great, because everyone is hot in this movie and no one is happy. At least the main characters are hot. That being said, it is in theaters if you do want to check it out. It's a lot of fun. I actually ended up enjoying it for the most part. I do want to shout Wrestle Rant on Twitter, Graham, GSM Matthews. He does a lot of great work as far as, wrestling journalism. Tremendous wrestling fan, tremendous movie fan. Great friend overall as well, even though we're like 3,000 miles apart. But he got to be at the Black Bag Presser and got to interview some of the cast, so good for him. But anyways, in theaters, if you want to check it out, 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So, this sensitive material is called Severus. What is Severus? It's that show on Apple TV without the N. You got the N out. Oh, Hogan, never change. Okay, jokes aside, basically, Clarissa and Freddie are sleeping together. There's a bit of an age difference. James and Zoe are together. Zoe is the psychiatrist, therapist of this particular agency. And this agency is very, very high tech. The movie cost like $50 million, and that's probably due to the cast. Even though it looks good and there were some cool sets, it was kind of low key on the sets. But the idea is George, after the human lie detector test stuff that he does, he starts to unfold because he finds out in the very beginning who actually was responsible for, the robbing, the taking of Severus. What is Severus? Is basically some type of, software, something that can actually cause a nuclear meltdown. They just throw a lot of this shit in, in the last little bit, and it kind of made me laugh, but nevertheless, that actually kind of, I don't know why it amused me, but it just did. So we get, that's basically what Severus is, and the idea is there's a few suspects. There's actually really only one because of a crucial piece of information. After some setup, Clarissa, the implication is that she likes older guys, but also she's not the best in relationships. George is a bit of an older guy. George realizes that his wife could actually be responsible for this, but he still loves his wife. They've had some conversations. Would you lie? Yes, but not to you. And would you kill for me, George? Because I'd kill for you. And if you have Cate Blanchett willing to kill for you, again, hold on to her. Maybe I will profess my love for Cate Blanchett one of these days. Shut up. But George also likes to fish. It's another little factor for a little bit later on. And James, meanwhile, his, brief fling with Zoe kind of, gets fractured. And there is stuff where basically he, lets it slip after they kind of have a bit of a breakup, and Zoe's very regimented, like they're still in her office. And he says, well, I told you a lot of stuff in confidence. I told you about Severus in confidence. Anything you tell me, Zoe says, do not worry about it. So it's fine. And meanwhile, Catherine goes to Zurich. Why is she going to Zurich? Why is she hiding this? What's actually going on? She's meeting with a guy that could possibly have ties to the Russian mob that wants to overthrow something. He just wants to do some crazy, kooky spy stuff. But the only way they can find this is to hack into a satellite. Clarissa has to, and it's just a couple minutes, like a 3-minute, 20-second window. But there's a tracking thing put on there, so they're found out. Now, George is nervous because he's usually so regimented, so careful. So now he's nervous. And this movie, by the way, is only 93 minutes with end credits. So they made this thing expedient. It doesn't drag. And while, again, treading familiar ground, it works. So it turns out basically that James ended up telling Zoe about what he did with Severus, because it wasn't Freddy, even though it could have been Freddy. There's a nice lie detector thing a little bit, later in the movie. Catherine gets told by Freddy about, what George did hacking the satellite, and it's all just leading back to this, where all this crazy stuff's going on, and all this stuff's coming home to roost. Everybody is going to end up at this dinner, but before that, Pierce Brosnan's Arthur, not King Arthur, even though he looks old enough to have been around when King Arthur was around, that mean but not wrong. He, seems to maybe kind of be in on this thing too, and maybe James is just his gopher, because how would the boss of something not necessarily know about this, especially somebody as smart as and just charming as Pierce Brosnan? Charming, yes. Sorry to every British person still watching this. I'm so sorry. But Kate's talking to him. Kate's talking to Michael, and all this stuff's going on. And Michael's really trying to calm down and regain control and do this stuff, because really, they are willing to go to the ends of the earth for each other, which they do. He ends up even taking James out fishing at one point, talking about Severus, talking about this is before the dinner, before all this. And James kind of plays it off and stuff like that, and plays it off just well enough that George doesn't end up killing him right there. Now, they end up doing some lie detector stuff, and Clarissa is so good at cheating the system and everything, even tightening her, tightening her sphincter and everything and stuff like that and everything. And yeah, those are the kind that you have to worry about. But anyway, I'm going to go no further on that. But nevertheless, she basically is able to ace this test, because there are ways to beat the lie detector test, but you really have to be goddamn good at it. You got to have balls of steel, lady balls or otherwise. So everybody's going to gather again for dinner, and the idea is there's this gun thrown right there. An old black bag refers to, what are you doing? Oh, black bag. What are you doing this Friday? Where were you this Friday? Black bag. It's something like you can tell enough to a person, but you can't tell them everything. That's what black bag refers to. Like a need-to-know basis, you don't need to know. It's something where, yeah, marriage relationships are important, but my job's even more important. But a gun is put on the table, and the idea is they're going to go around, they're going to talk about all this stuff, and George is basically going to grill them about this, because he grilled them all with the lie detector thing. And it turns out that James was the one that did it. And James did it basically for a shit pot full of money, because there was a $7 million pound deposit in a Zurich bank. And oh man, it was made in Catherine's name, and James even said, hey, wait a second, this is an alias your wife used. But then, on the fishing, trip, he says, it turns out other people also used it, not just your wife. Well, that was a glitch. Yeah, you would have thought I would have known that, and I should have kicked myself. And probably realizing, well, shit, I thought that was something that George wouldn't have figured out, but I should have figured out George, being basically practically robotic, would have figured this out. There's also a great scene earlier where George is talking to Clarissa, and just this stuff about her relationships and her issues. And actually, in the first dinner scene, there's this great moment where Freddy, it's revealed, even though he confesses, or he claims that he has not cheated, he did, and she stabs him in the hand, which is a great scene. There's some great dark comedy in this. And it turns out that James actually did this, and James is going to try to take people out. But then, of course, James ends up dead because, obviously, why wouldn't he? You get this far without people really necessarily dying, except some of the Russian guys that Arthur may or may not have been working with. And James ends up basically, the fall guy, because he was the one that stole Severus. He gets dumped in the goddamn lake, and then there we go. And then we get Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett on the bed, and then we cut to credits. So it's entertaining. It's not necessarily something, again, that's going to reinvent the wheel, but I had a lot of fun with this. I really did enjoy this. I'm going to give this an A- because it had 4 stars on Letterboxd because it was entertaining. Now, it is not something that's going to enter my favorite movies of the year list, but it's something that I ended up enjoying. It's something that probably could have gone to streaming. I don't necessarily know if it's going to make a lot in theaters, but what do I know? Not much, evidently. So, nevertheless, A-. Agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.